Hi there, I'm Amy the Family Chef, and I'm here today to teach you how to make pot roast in the crock pot. I have a boneless chuck roast here. It's been rolled. That's how I got it from the store. You could also use a cross rib roast, a few other cuts of meat. A brisket would go well in the crock pot. And what I'm going to show you is how to take it from this point to something that is absolutely delicious about 4 to 6, sometimes 8 hours later, depending upon how much time you have. What I did was I started with the meat and I put some seasonings on that. And I have a couple different seasonings over there. There's a steak and chop, grill and broil. There's a garlic and herb seasoning that's salt-free. I like Pappy's, and Trader Joe's has a 21 seasoning salute. This particular pot roast has the steak and chop as well as the salt-free garlic and herb, and guess what? I ended up adding some salt back. I really like the flavor of the garlic and herb seasoning, but I always salt my food, so I sort of like to do that combination. So I'm going to sear that first in a real hot pan. The pan is heating up now, and then as soon as it's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my seasonings. I have my classic mirepoix. Mirepoix is simply onion, celery, and carrot. It's not going to be cooked. I did very little chopping. I'm going to add some beef broth. I really like this brand of Better Than Bouillon beef base. I'm also going to add a can of organic diced tomatoes. Gives a great flavor, and a little bit, maybe about a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. So let's cut over to the saute pan and let's see how we sear our meat, because the searing is a very important process of the crock pot, of the pot roast, to give it really good flavor. But you see my saute pan, I'm using a stainless pan. I'm adding 1, maybe 2 teaspoons of olive oil, and that olive oil is going to start smoking pretty quickly, so I've got to get this meat right in there. Okay, here we go. Wow, that's what you want to hear. Notice that I also had put some seasoning on the bottom, and that way I didn't need to sort of turn over, get my hands wet so they were dirty. That helps. And I used the tongs. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the exhaust fan because it's going to get very smoky in my kitchen. And what I'm going to do is about 3 to 4 minutes on each side. So let's take a quick break. And I'll come back once I've turned it over, and I'll show you the point at which I turn that over. So I'm back now. I want you to take a look at the searing. Now what I did was I had a hot pan. I put about 2 teaspoons of olive oil, and then I just put the meat in and flat side down. Look at how nice and brown that is. It was about 3 minutes in the pan. The reason I did the olive oil so it didn't stick too much. If I had a non-stick pan, I did not need to add as much olive oil. Heat is pretty high. It's about, I'll show you. It's just about medium. Okay, I love a hot pan. It gives it such great flavor. And the searing, besides giving it really good flavor, is also going to sear the juices. So let's take a look at that pan. Nice browning going on. I'm also going to sear the sides pretty quickly just so it sort of has that nice brown color all around, and that's what you want it to look like. Now, one other thing I want to point out is, what have you noticed I'm not doing? Am I stirring the pan? Am I shaking it? No. When you sear meat, you really want to just let it cook. You don't need to move it around, and the way it's going to get the most browning and the best flavor is just let it cook. Let's turn everything around and I'll be right back. So next what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to deglaze the pan a little bit. I have some sherry. It's just something I got from the grocery store. It's a Christian Brothers dry sherry. I've turned the heat off, and I'm just going to add this, maybe 1, 2 tablespoons. And the one thing that I want you to notice that I did was that I added it when I had shut the heat off. I did have it happen once where I had added some wine or sherry and it sort of splashed over and the whole thing caught on fire. It really kind of scared me, so I shut the heat off. I have the sherry in there. What that's doing, it's cooking off a little bit and it's grabbing all the little bits that are on the bottom, and that's all going to go into the crock pot. The other thing is, if you don't have sherry, you could use red wine, you could use white wine, you could use marsala, You could use brandy or cognac, and if you don't like that taste or you don't want it, again, it'll still be delicious, but I'm sort of making my best pot roast ever, so I'm giving you all my little secrets. All right, let's bring it over and get it in the pot. So what I've done is I've added the pot roast to the crock pot. I put in the liquid that was in the pan, that was the sherry, and then remember I had that cup of water that I was going to use for the base. What I did was I put that into the pan, and I used that to sort of get all the bits that were up, and that's what I did here. So any of that flavor that was left in the pan, I'm gonna get, you know, from that. If you're using beef broth and you're not using the bouillon, you can still put the broth in there. So let's go ahead and start adding things, and then we'll take a look once I've added it all. Okay, so I'm back, and let's talk about what I added. I placed the beef in there, and I had the sherry that I'd used to deglaze the pan, and then I had put some water in the pan to get up all the other bits. And when I poured that in, one thing I did not do was I did not pour it over the meat. Why do you think I did that? Well, if you notice the meat, there's all sorts of spices and herbs and such on top, and we don't want to wash that off. So I poured the water just on the side. I did pour some of the tomatoes right on top. That's the diced tomatoes. I put in a teaspoon of sea salt, and then I added half an onion that was cut in 6, 2 celery stalks, and maybe 8 baby carrots. I also added about a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, and I added beef base. So let me show you what that looks like. So beef base sort of looks like, you know, not like a pudding, but it's a real thick, concentrated flavor, and I really like this particular one. So for this pot roast, I put in about 1.5 teaspoons, and that's going to give it just great flavor. So what I did was I set it on low for 6 hours, and then it should be done after that. What I usually will do is especially if I'm home, I'll check it after about maybe 5 hours, and I'll check to see what it looks like. Now remember too that I had seared this, so the cooking process actually has started. And we'll check it after 6 hours and see how it looks. And you know, if you're home, you can always check it, and you can start on high and move it to low, especially with the type of crock pot that I have. I have the official crock pot. Everything else is really a slow cooker. I really like that I can change the setting from low to high to warm. I can change the time in half-hour increments. So that's one of the benefits of this type of crock pot. All right, I'll see you in a few hours. Hopefully, you know, this is where that whole smell-o-vision, one day maybe it will be a reality. It smells so yummy in here. I can't wait till this is done. Hello, it's Amy the Family Chef, and I'm back ready to look at the pot roast that has been in the crock pot for 6 hours. Let's take a look at the broth that's been created. Oh, there are the tomatoes and the onions. I've already put some on top. And we see the onions and the carrots. Looks very delicious. Now I'm going to do a fork test where I'm going to take the fork and test the meat. Oh my goodness, look at that. It is just falling apart. Can I eat it now? It is so tender and delicious looking, well, smelling at least. I cannot wait for our dinner. So you see that when you cook a pot roast in the crock pot, it is very easy. You just need to add onions, celery, carrots, maybe a can of diced tomatoes, some broth. Let it cook up. It creates a broth of its own. And in 4 to 6 hours, you could do it on 4 hours on high or 6 hours on low, you will have dinner. The broth may look a bit thin, so what you could do is strain the broth into a what's called a fat separator. Take some of the fat out and then make a roux on the stove, and then add the broth to that to make it gravy. You could thicken it with cornstarch, and you could serve this over mashed potatoes. You could serve it over noodles, polenta, millet. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed my video. Take care.